Welcome to the Claude Code cohort. I'm tremendously excited to be running an AI coding cohort at last. I, like you, have been blown away by the increased capabilities of these models and these harnesses. Or maybe you're still yet to be convinced about the power of this whole phenomenon. Either way, let me be your guide and let me show you where we're going to end up after finishing this course. Now, the most obvious and banal thing that you're going to learn here is how to use Claude Code. By the end of the course, obviously, you're going to be a master of Claude Code and all of its features. But as I was teaching this course, I realized I'm not actually making a Claude Code course here, I'm making an AI coding course. And so the most important thing you're going to get out of this course is real engineering skills. Now, if you already feel like you have real engineering skills, then fantastic. What I found is that I needed to adapt my engineering skills to be able to work with these new tools. I believe that while the tools have changed, the fundamental approach really hasn't. And so you can think of this course as like a conversion course to take your real engineering skills and use these new tools with them. But for folks who still feel like they haven't had the grounding in what real engineering looks like, then this course is going to be great for you too. We're going to be walking through planning, walking through requirements gathering, walking through how to properly build prototypes. We're going to learn how to structure code bases to make the most out of feedback loops, and we're going to tie all of that into AI. And the final form of this is going to be an AI agent that we can trust to run AFK. In other words, while we're away from the keyboard doing other things. One of the things I see people say all the time about AI is that I just have to sit there and watch it, and I feel like I'm being less productive. Well, that's because you haven't set up your code base and set up your environment to run AI properly autonomously. But getting there and guaranteeing quality at the end of each AFK run is really difficult. And that's where the real engineering skills come in, because you need to make your code base something that AI likes to work in and produces quality code in. And that's often way more about the code than it is the AI. Now, to get there, we're going to be working through a playground. This playground is essentially a 20,000 line application written in TypeScript, React, and Node. Now, while most of these exercises will take place in this playground, you could totally just take the exercises and run them on your own code base if you want to. You really don't need to know that much about TypeScript and Node and React in order to get set up and get working. We're fundamentally learning about how to get the most out of the harness, and the lessons that we're learning can be applied to any language in any project. Because guess what? AI is going to be doing most of the code writing here. By the end of this course, you will have enough knowledge to take Claude Code and start using it as an autonomous agent in your own code base. You'll be able to move faster than you've done before because you're effectively able to parallelize yourself with Claude. You'll know when to intervene as the human, for instance, prototyping and research. And you'll be able to build plans, build PRDs, build multi-phase Kanban boards that allow your AI to just work for hours unaccompanied. And if that sounds great to you, then you are in the right place. Nice work, and I'll see you in the next one. Okay, let's clone the repo and pull down the actual workspace that we're going to be doing the course in. The course is at AI-hero-dev cohort 003 project. I will add a link below. You can clone it to your local setup by pressing code here, by copy and pasting this clone button here, so cloning the web URL. And once that's done, the code will be in your local file system. Again, I'll have a command for that below if you need it. Next, you will need to download Node.js in order to complete the exercises. You can go to the link below. You can choose your version, either the 22 version or the 24 version will be fine. You can follow the instructions here, making sure you select the right platform, making sure you select the right setup, and you should be good to go. Once that's done, you should be able to open your project in VS Code or in your terminal, and you should be able to run node-v here and see some kind of version printed back to you. Once you've done this, you can then run corepack enable here. And what this does is it installs the package manager we're going to be using for the repository. The package manager is pnpm, and it's very, very good. And the setup really is as simple as that. You can just run corepack enable, and then you can run pm commands like this, pnpm-v, and it should work. Hello, Edit Matt here with something I forgot to say in the first version of this video, which is that once you've installed pnpm via corepack enable and you're ready to run the dev server and see what's happening, you first need to run pnpm install. When you run this, it will install all of the packages, pulling them down from the npm registry and getting them in your node modules ready for you to run. So once that's done, you can carry on with the next bit. Once that's done, you should be able to crack on and do pnpm dev to run the dev server. This will run a development server on on localhost 5173, or in my case 5175. If I run this, I can see, oh no, something went wrong, no such table, courses. The reason this is happening is I've not set up my database yet. So if I go back to this terminal and I press Ctrl+C, and now I can run a new command, and I'm going to run pnpm db:/seed. If we look in the package.json of the repository, we can see that there is a db:/seed command mentioned in scripts here. And this will seed our database with some dummy data so that we can see a proper working application. So I ran that, we've created the tables, it created 9 users, 1 admin, 2 instructors, and 6 students. It created some courses, some quizzes, some enrollments, etc. And now if I go down to the bottom and I run pnpm dev again, then we should be able to see, if we go on localhost 5175, that we now see a beautiful working course platform. We're not going to explore this too thoroughly because one of the exercises in the course is using LLMs or using Claude Code to explore Codebases. So let's not use our human eyes too much, let's let the robots do it. Finally, if you've not already done this, then you should head to the Claude Code docs, which I'll link below, and you should install Claude Code. Once you've done that, then you should be able to cancel out of the dev server here. We can run Claude inside here, and it should open up Claude Code. From here, you may need to log in with your Anthropic subscription or your API key. I definitely recommend using a subscription instead of an API key because it always works out cheaper. But from there, once you can run the dev server and run Claude, then you're good to go in the repo. If you have any setup questions or any weirdnesses, then head to the Discord and I will help you out. Nice work, and I will see you in the next one. All right, now the repo is fully set up, let's talk about setting up Claude. And the first question you probably have is, which model should I choose? You can choose your model by specifying /model and running this, and you can set the model for Claude Code. So what I recommend is going with the defaults. But the tricky thing is that your defaults will be different based on which subscription you have. So for me, I'm on 5x max. So my default model is Opus 4.6 currently. However, if you're on the Pro subscription, then your default will be Sonnet 4.6 instead. I do not recommend using Haiku at any point during the course. Basically, it's just not capable enough. And even though it's fast, it just won't handle some of the workflows that we're going to throw at it. So those are my recommendations. If you're on 5x max or the max plan, then go for Opus 4.6. If you're not, then I recommend going to 4.6 Sonnet. And I also recommend choosing medium effort. You can choose low effort just by adjusting left and right here, or high effort. I basically recommend whatever the default the harness suggests is. For instance, recently they defaulted to high for Opus 4.6, and then they lowered the default to medium again. They must have done some internal evaluations that actually checks that, okay, medium is fine for most work. So to select the model and the effort, I can just press enter here, and then we can see set model to default Opus 4.6. So your next question probably is, which subscription should I get? There are several options. You can go for Pro, you can go for Max 5x, or you can go for Max 20x. Now, I can't give you a recommendation because I don't know what your constraints are in terms of cost. I don't know what your constraints are in terms of how much you're going to use this going forward. What I would say is that I created the course with Max 5x on this price point. So if you want to use the best model Claude has available, which is Opus 4.6, then I do recommend getting that Max 5x, even if it's just for a month. But if you can't stretch that far, or you just want to try it out, then Pro with Sonnet 4.6 will be good enough. I can't guarantee that if you're not like diving deep into every lesson, diving deep into every section, that you won't come up against usage limits, but you should be able to get through it with Pro for sure. So those are my recommendations. Use the default model for your subscription tier and decide between Pro or 5x Max depending on what your budget is. Nice work, and I will see you in the next one. This course is structured into really interactive exercises, and most of these interactive exercises are going to need you to get your repo into a certain state. Luckily, I've given you a really nice feature that you can use in order to just manipulate your repo and get it into the right state for each lesson. We are on the first exercise page of the entire thing, which is just build a feature. And at the top here, we have a set of commits. Now, what these commits do is they let you preview how the code is going to change throughout the lesson. This is the very, very first exercise in the entire course. So we start on the main branch, and then if you want to see my solution, then you can go to this commit. Well, how do you go there, you may ask? Well, you press this copy button and 2 options show up. First, you can choose to reset the entire repo to that commit. We can click this and it will copy it to our clipboard, and then we can go into our project here and just paste it in. Once we pasted that in, then we can run it. Because we're on the main branch, we cannot reset the main branch, so we're going to create a new branch. Let's just call it dev branch. branch for now. So we've now created that new branch, dev branch, and it's in the exact state described here. So it's the solution to this exercise. We can check this by going into the code and we can see that yes, there is a rating service here. And if we go back into the code here and we say git checkout main, then we can see that the rating service has completely disappeared. You can see it because it's got this little line through it. So that is what reset does, is it resets the entire branch to match that commit. This does mean that if you've done any work on that branch, you are going to lose that work, but it does guarantee that you won't get any merge conflicts between my work and yours. So what does cherry pick do? Well, cherry pick maps onto the git cherry pick command that you may know about, just like reset maps onto the git reset command, which you may already know. Cherry pick applies changes from only this commit to your project. This means that if you've got some work locally that you want to keep, for instance, a PRD that you've built that you really like, but you want to grab some of my code, for instance, the star ratings code, then you can copy the cherry pick command, paste it in, run it, and you just get that code from the commit. But of course, if there are conflicts between your code and my code, then they might cause merge conflicts. Just like if you and a colleague have been working on a similar part of the code base, you might get merge conflicts there. However, these are usually pretty simple to solve because you can just get Claude to solve them. Now we've jumped ahead to the second lesson in the repo, which is the plan execute clear loop. This one has two commits associated with it. The first one lets you start the lesson. In other words, it's the end state from the previous lesson. Or if you want to, you can jump ahead to the solution. And finally, one more tip here. If you're not sure which commit you want to reset to, then you can run pnpm reset and then you get a choice of all of the different options. I'm using up and down here just to kind of navigate around them, and I can use return to choose one. Again, we are on the main branch, and so we'd need to create a new branch in order to get it working. Finally, the way that these courses generally work is that I tend to push updates while the course is happening, either to fix local setup issues or things like that. And so I've added a pnpm pull command. This lets you pull in my latest changes into your workspace really simply. Just go to the branch that you want to update and run pnpm pull, and then it should just work. Oh, there we go. We can't pull on main. We need to switch to a working branch first. So if we git checkout to our dev branch, then we can run pnpm pull and it should just work. Hopefully that all makes sense, and you can ask in the Discord if you have any questions. Nice work, and I'll see you in the next one. As part of this course, you get office hours with me. This is about a 30 to 45 minute live stream that we do on day 1, day 5, and day 8. It's a YouTube live stream, so you can just log in with your YouTube account and comment there, and I'll be able to see your comments and we'll have a nice chat. And we can basically talk about anything. This could be stuff in the course, or it could be stuff that's happened while the course has occurred. The videos for the office hours will be just available as YouTube VODs, so I'll keep them up there. This is absolutely not mandatory viewing. It's mostly just for vibes and for having a bit of fun during the course. Though of course, if there is something that you want to walk through in depth with me, then that is absolutely the time to do it as well. If interesting stuff comes out from the office hours, I usually record it as a little explainer somewhere in the course, so don't feel like you have to watch the whole thing just to catch any golden nuggets that might fall from this particular goose. Or eggs, I suppose, if it's a goose. But anyway, I won't be laying eggs on stream, that's for sure. The links for all of the office hours are below. Nice work, and I'll see you in the next one. Alright, so you got Claude Code ready to go and installed. Let's open it up and check out the first few commands that I want you to learn. For this entire course, I'm going to be running Claude from within VS Code. We're going to talk about the relationship between Claude Code and VS Code, but for now, it's okay just to run Claude inside the integrated terminal. What you should see is a UI kind of like this. I can't promise that they haven't changed the UI since they've recorded this, but something they will definitely keep is this enormous input box here. We can say to Claude, hello, how are you? And then to send it, we can press return inside the terminal. It comes back with, hi, I'm doing well, thanks for asking, how can I help you today? In other words, this so far is so much like any other AI chat application that you've used already. At this point, I would like you to run something. I'd like you to run / then terminal -setup. It should turn this nice shade of lilac when you've completed the command here. You can then use enter to initiate the command, and this will set up a couple of key bindings for you. In my case, because I'm on Windows subsystem Linux, then I have to install this manually myself. But if you're on a different operating system, such as Windows or like Mac, you're going to just have it installed for you. But once it is installed, you'll be able to do something very nice, which is you'll be able to press Shift Enter to add new lines lines into your input here, which is really important when you want to express more complicated things. For instance, I can type thank you and then add a couple of new lines and then say very much like this for sort of dramatic effect. So from here, let's show a couple of really important commands that we're going to be using on every single time that we use Claude Code. The first one here is /usage, which shows your plan usage limits. So again, just to show you that again, because I did that quite fast, we go / then usage, and I can even use tab here to complete the command there. So again, usage like that, and then I run it with return. And this shows me how much Claude Code usage I have left in my current session on my current week, and there's a separate one for current week sonnet only. Now this will probably look different based on which plan you're on and what Claude plans even look like in the future. For me, I'm on 5x max, and this is what it looks like with 5x max. I can then press escape to cancel out of this. Another really important command is to run /context here. And what context is going to do is show me a graph of all of the different ways I'm using up my context window. We are currently using about 21,000 tokens out of a maximum of 200k tokens. So we're using around 10% here. We're going to be talking a lot more about context throughout this entire course, and so this is a great way of giving you the ability to introspect the context that you're using and how much you have left. The next command you definitely need to know about is to go down to the bottom and run clear here, which clears the entire conversation history. Clear resets that context window back to 0. So it's kind of like you started up a whole new chat with Claude Code. It's forgotten everything that you talked about in your last chat. Again, we're going to be talking a lot about when to clear the context window, but this is how you do it. You either, of course, you can either just cancel out of code by pressing Control-C twice and just starting up a new Claude session here, or you can clear the current session by just running clear. Now finally, how do you interrupt Claude when it's running? Well, I'm going to ask it a question that's going to take a little longer to answer, which is tell me about this code base here. And anytime I want to, I can just press escape to interrupt it. Once I've interrupted it, if I wanted to go again, I can just say go as well. And that was me literally just typing in the word go and sending it on its way again. And if I want to interrupt it again, I can just press escape and then it's stopped doing what it's doing. Okay, so we've learned how to add basic prompts inside here. We've learned that we can do Shift Enter to add new lines. We've learned how to invoke commands with / and using tab to get to the end of the command. We've learned how to run usage here to check our plan usage limits. We've learned how to run context here to visualize the current context, and we've learned how to clear the context with / clear. So I would say those are the basics done. Nice work, and I will see you in the next one. Now we understand the basics about Claude Code, I want to give you some nice little tips that you can use to improve your prompting. You may want to reference individual files when you're using Claude Code. For instance, you may want to say, tell me lots of information about this file or make some changes to this specific file. To do that, you can use the @ command and start typing inside here. For instance, I might want something inside the routes.ts file and it's just right here. So I can autocomplete by pressing up and down on the keyboard. When I want to select something, I can press tab here. And of course, if I want to add another file, I can just go through that process again, where I can say app and then db, and let's see what's in here. Maybe db schema is what I need, so I tab and I complete there. When I then run this by pressing return, these files will be automatically read into the context window here. This means that it doesn't need to go and find those files manually, it's just read them automatically. This does cost you a little bit of upfront time, in other words, having to find these files, but it is worth it because it gives Claude exactly what it needs to succeed. One other tip you might not know about, even if you've been using Claude Code for a while, is if you have a big prompt here and you want to, let's say, not do this now, but do it later, you can press Control-S and it will stash it. This has now stashed my command inside Claude's memory here, and I can now submit another command, let's say hello, like this, and it will then rehydrate and sort of come back to me here. So again, I can stash with Control-S, I can submit something, says I'm good, thanks, and when I submit, it will then restore after that. This is really useful when you're giving Claude some feedback, let's say on some code that it's not done very well, and then you realize, oh, I just need to tell it something first, stash my current command, bring it back later. If you then realize, oh, I don't need this command at all, you can press Control-C and get rid of it. One other really sweet thing you can do is you can copy and paste images into Claude Code. I've got this lovely image of Lake Bled in Slovenia, I can right click it, copy the image and go to Claude Code. And if you copy and paste it in, it can then reference that image. Annoyingly, I'm on Windows Subsystem Linux and this doesn't actually work on WSL. But if you try it for yourself and press return, then it should be able to tell you where am I in the world, and it should tell you Lake Bled in Slovenia. Pretty cool. So to summarize then, we've covered referencing particular files with this @ symbol here. We've covered stashing with Control S, and we've covered pasting in images, which I'm kind of gutted not to be able to show you. And hopefully you were able to follow along clearly and nothing went wrong or did anything weird. Nice work, and I will see you in the next one. Let's now talk about how Claude integrates with your IDE of choice. I'm using VS Code for this course, but you do not have to. You can use Cursor, you can use Windsurf, Anti-Gravity, whatever fancy tools are available now. The way that Claude integrates with it is via this IDE command here, where it says you can manage the IDE integrations and show the status. If we run this, we can see that we are connected to Visual Studio Code. I've got this working because I have installed the Claude Code for VS Code extension here. But if you run IDE in your terminal here, then it should show you how to install your version for your IDE that you're using. If you're following along, let's press enter to confirm and get out of this. The IDE integration is really for diff management. That's the thing that comes up most often. For instance, if we prompt Claude to say remove the test watch command from package.json, we can see that it read one file, so it read the package.json, and now it's made an update to package.json. Now, if we weren't connected to the IDE, then this would show as a diff inside the terminal, which is a little bit awkward. But since we're connected to VS Code, we can actually close this and we can see the diff in VS Code. This is really nice because this is much, much richer, and it lets us actually scroll and see what's going on in the file, and we can see that this is a decent edit. We can then either press this accept proposed changes up here, or we can click inside here and save the file. And by saving the file, we agree to the changes. This is the reason that I'm running Claude Code inside VS Code. It's really nice to be able to dive in sometimes and just tweak some things about Claude Code's output. And if I need to update any diffs or review any diffs, it's so much nicer doing that in a proper IDE than just doing it in the terminal. There are more features and there are more ways that VS Code integrates with Claude Code, and your IDE probably does too. But this diff feature was the one I wanted to show off because it's the one I end up using, 99% of the time. So hopefully you were able to follow along with that. Feel free to go back through the video if you weren't, and ask any questions on the Discord if you ran into trouble. Nice work, and I will see you in the next one. One really important thing that Claude Code allows you to do is go backwards and forwards in the conversation. This is really important for when you're trying something out that maybe you later want to revert. For instance, in the previous video, we just did a change where we removed a dev script. Now, what I could say to Claude is just revert that, please, and it will go and undo the change that it just did before by just rewriting, re-adding it back in. And I'm just going to accept this by pressing Control S to save the diff. But there's another option here. I can press escape in quick succession to enter rewind mode. And in rewind mode, I get to restore the code and or the conversation to this point. For instance, if I just want to revert the command that I just did, I can just choose this one. This one at the bottom is the current state. This one is the point at which I said revert that, please. And so I can select it with enter. Now there's a few different options here that I can choose. The first one will be to restore the code and the conversation. In other words, to just rewind my session to the point before this code edit was made. Or I could restore the conversation but keep the code as it was. That would be number 2. Or I could restore the code but keep the conversation how it is. The one I choose most often is just to restore the full code and conversation. So I'll do that now. And we can see that the code has been reverted. So now we're back to the point at which we had test watch deleted. If I want to go back further, I can open up the terminal again and just press escape twice to go back further. And let's choose, we go back to the point where we remove the test watch command completely. Another interesting option is this summarize from here command, but we'll talk about that later. I'm actually going to cancel this by choosing never mind and just sticking to the current state. One other thing that's also really important is the fact that Claude actually persists its sessions locally. What this means is you can quit out of Claude by pressing Control-C twice, and then you can resume it in a bunch of different ways. You can either resume the session by running this command directly that you get from the output of the previous command. So I can just run Claude resume and then the UUID, and then I just go back into the exact state that I left previously. Another way of doing this is if I can just Control-C twice again to exit, and I open up a new session just by typing Claude. This one is a totally clear session. Inside here, I can press /resume and resume a previous conversation, and now I get to choose all of the conversations that I've had here. I can even search through all of the sessions that I've had in the repo if I want. Let's go back to the one that we were just using, and I can press return to go into that, and again, I'm back in that same session. So if your session is interrupted for any reason, then you can always resume it because Claude persists it locally. So that's how Claude allows you to go backwards and forwards in the conversation, either by entering rewind mode by pressing double escape and just kind of like zooming through all of the content here, or I can cancel out of this and restart my session anytime. I can even just choose to resume the previous session by running Claude -- continue. And again, this pulls me into exactly where I was. Beautiful. So very nice work, and I will see you in the next one. One super important part of working with Claude Code is running bash commands. Bash commands turn your agent from just a passive code writer into something that can actually seek feedback loops, can actually work with your project, and can use all the power of bash at its disposal to find information and to do stuff. Now we can't just manually ask Claude, okay, run the dev server for me. And because it's quite smart, it will understand, okay, I need to read the package.json, I need to find where the dev server is, and then I need to run it like this. We'll get into what this is doing here and this kind of approval setup here. But suffice to say, there are some times when you just know what command you want to run and you just want to run it and then put the result into Claude's context. So the way you do that is I've just restarted my Claude Code instance. I'm going to just put an exclamation mark, and now I've entered bash mode. And now anything I put in here will be turned into a bash command and actually run for Claude. So for instance, why don't I run npm run type check inside here? And now it just runs the command after I press enter. Now, because I haven't run npm install in my setup here, I'm getting a lot of errors. And these errors are now present to Claude in its context. So I'm going to get it to help me solve these errors, and it will be able to see the errors and actually work with them. And there we go. It's figured out that Zod is in package.json but not installed. I should run npm install. There we go. Now this works well for commands that essentially have a start and an end. But what about commands that are supposed to persist, like long-running dev servers? Well, for that we can run npm run dev inside bash mode here. And what we can do is while it's running, we can actually press Control-B to run it in the background. And in this version of Claude Code, something appears that says command was manually background with user with ID this. And any output in that task goes into a local file. You can then see that underneath our status line here, there is a little background task that's showing. And so I can zoom downwards with just the down arrow there, and I can press return to see it. And now I can actually view the shell. I can view what's going on here, and I can see that it's on localhost 5175. I've got lots of options here. I can stop it with X if I want to, or I can just press left to go back, and now I'm back in my Claude Code instance. This is really useful when you're debugging a problem with your dev server, let's say, or with a long-running command, because Claude can see where all of the logs are being written to. It can try something out in the UI maybe, or send a curl request, and then it can actually see the output of the dev server. So I've just reset my instance here so we can see another feature, which is suspending Claude Code. If, for instance, I want to run something that I don't want Claude to see the results of, or I don't care to show it, and I have some state inside Claude that I want to preserve, then I can use suspend. I can press Control-Z inside here, and Claude Code has been suspended. This means I can now run any command I want to. I can just echo foo inside here, and this is not visible to Claude Code. If I want to bring Claude Code back, I can just run FG here, and I get my Claude Code instance back with all of its state. So this is great if you just want to go, okay, don't care about Claude Code, do something like whatever command I want, and then FG to bring it back. So the decision tree for this really looks like this. If you want the output of the bash command that you're running to be visible to Claude, then you can use bash mode here by using the exclamation mark, and you can background that with Control-B and then manage those backgrounded tasks. Again, really, really useful for dev servers. I don't use it every single time, but when I do use it, it's usually for debugging some kind of dev server issue. But if you want the command to be totally hidden from Claude, you can just suspend it quickly with Control-Z. And of course, these are Windows shortcuts, so you might be needing to do something different if you're on Mac. So those are all the different ways that you can manage bash commands in Claude Code. Nice work, and I'll see you in the next one. Whenever you're working with an agent, you always need to think about risk versus reward, especially in how much power you give over to it. If I were to give Claude infinite power, like many people have done, then I would be understandably nervous that it would do something crazy with that power. For instance, delete my entire file system by accident. To mitigate that, Claude Code has a very detailed permissions model, and by default is very strict with itself with what it allows the agent to actually go and do. For instance, I'm going to tell Claude Code to run a bash command, to run echo hello. And because echo is an extremely safe command, Claude Code thinks this command is fine for it to run. But if I get it to do something else, such as run a type check on the project, then it might do something differently. We can see it's now requesting to run a command here. So it's trying to run pnpm type check. So we see a few things here. We see, first of all, the command, the exact command it's going to run. We then see the reason it wants to run it. It wants to run a type check using React Router TypeGen and TSC. And we have three options here. We can say, yes, you're allowed to do this time, or yes, and you're allowed to then, from now on, run any pnpm type check command inside this project. Or we say no, and inside here, we can do something clever. If, for instance, we don't want it to do this exact command, we can press tab and we can give a reason here. For instance, we might just want to use npx tsc instead for some reason. And now it's asking us if we can run npx tsc instead. So let's say we agree to this and we say, yep, and you don't need to ask again inside this project. What actually happens? Well, first of all, for some reason, it's actually failed the type check on this branch, which is, I think, my fault. As we can see, it actually reported the results from the type check and they were reported back to the LLM. But crucially, our preferences here were recorded inside a file just at the top here. This is inside the .claude folder, and this is inside settings.local.json. Here we have a permissions property inside this piece of JSON here. And inside this allow array are all of the things we are allowing for this project. The syntax is really important to understand here, because we can actually edit this ourselves if we want to, ahead of time, allow things to happen in the repo. For instance, if we want to, we can say bash here and just say, let's say pnpm type check. And this means that the pnpm type check command will now be automatically allowed by Claude Code. If instead we want to say that all pnpm commands are available, then we can replace this with a wildcard here. We can also disallow Claude from doing things by using the deny inside here. For instance, we might not want it to run bash, let's say git push, for instance, and so git push with a wildcard would be a safe one here to deny it always. However, it's not just bash commands that Claude Code needs permission in order to be able to run. Claude Code can also search the web and fetch web pages in order to back up what it's seeing locally. So for instance, I can get it to fetch info about React Router TypeGen from the web, and it's now asking me to do a web search for React Router TypeGen. If I say yes and don't ask again for web search commands, then it's going to add it to the settings.local.json up here. And we can see that it's then going to fetch from this website, reactrouter.com. So now it's fetched from there and it's given me a summary of how React Router TypeGen works based on the actual documentation. The final thing to say is that these settings.local.json are, in my project, they're git ignored, so they apply only for me. But if I wanted to share these with my team, let's say, and have a specific set of things that were always allowed within this repo that were part of those project settings, then I would rename settings.local.json to settings.json. These can then be shared with your team or any Claude Code instance that's running on your repo, and they will pick these up too. This can be incredibly powerful for anyone starting on your repo for the first time. They just run Claude, and Claude then knows what's allowed for that repo, which can be a lot faster than having to manually set up the permissions for yourself each time. We're going to be touching on permissions more throughout the course, of course, but I just wanted to give you an intro so you understand what the approval flow looks like, and you can edit these permissions if you like. Nice work, and I will see you in the next one.